We have so much to talk about this morning, so let's bring in CNN political commentator and host of CNN's Smerconish, Michael Smerconish, radio talk show host Hugh Hewitt, and CNN political commentator and Donald Trump supporter Jeffrey Lord. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Hugh, I want to start with you and get your take on the debate. After the debate, you tweeted out #OpenConvention. Does that mean that you think there were that many winners?
Yeah, it does, exactly, Allison. Donald Trump and Marco Rubio took the gold last night. They both won their respective fights, but Ted Cruz and Chris Christie were not far behind them, and Jeb Bush is hanging in there. I will say, though, Donald Trump crushed it on New York values, but Ted Cruz crushed it on eligibility. Marco Rubio got on base every time, if I can mix some metaphors, and Chris Christie had some solid at-bats as well. So that's why I think those four are there. But I go back to the analogy I've used all along. Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali fought three big fights in the 70s. Frazier won the first, Ali won the second and the third, and they were both punched out at the end. Trump beat Cruz last night, but it was a tough fight for both guys. They have Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina ahead. Greatest race of my lifetime. Donald Trump won his race last night. Marco Rubio won his.
All right, Michael, do you agree with that assessment? What were your takeaways?
I agree in part and I disagree in part. The first thing I want to say is that each of the individuals on that stage has upped their game. I sat back last night and I took a look and I reflected on where we began back in the summer in that first debate, and I think they've all significantly improved, and that needs to be acknowledged. There were no knockout blows. I want to say something, and I'm glad that Jeffrey Lord is paying attention because I've never said this. Donald Trump won last night. I have to give him credit. I thought that he was strong. He usually gets fatigued by the end of these debates. Instead, I think that he came on stronger as it progressed. The issues were in his wheelhouse. The New York City answer was excellent relative to the birther disagreement. The point was never to knock Ted Cruz out of the race. It was to knock him off balance, and he has succeeded in that insofar as the last 2 weeks have been all about this. And finally, with regard to the establishment class, I disagree with Hugh. I give it to John Kasich. I think he distinguished himself last night. I look at that Monmouth survey in New Hampshire, and I think he's the one who could emerge in New Hampshire.
Jeffrey, one of the big headlines from last night is that the bromance between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump appears to be over. Are these guys broken up for good?
No, not necessarily, but this had to come at some point. Only one person's going to win this, and bromances are not going to survive any kind of election situation like this. So I really think that this was inevitable. The problem, I think, first of all, no question, Donald Trump, I thought, won this debate. My friend Michael is dead on, correct here. And I think his New York answer was tremendous. Most of my family is from New York, and that certainly resonated with me, and I suspect it resonated with a lot of people who are not from New York. But the problem, I think, for Senator Cruz with his eligibility question, it's still, Donald Trump isn't saying you are not a citizen. He's saying the Democrats will sue and say that. That's correct. There's just no question here that if Ted Cruz is on that ticket, one way or another, that there will be a lawsuit. So I think that's a definite problem.
Hugh, you're hold on, Jeffrey. Hugh, you're shaking your head dismissively. Do you think that issue was dispensed with last night?
It's dead. It's done. I called up my law partner yesterday, former federal judge. All right, so he's a federal judge. Stephen Larson used to run the United States Attorney's Office, Organized Crime Division, sat on the U.S. District Court for 6 years for George W. Bush. I said, Judge Larson, is there any there? What about these lawsuits? He said they would all be dismissed immediately for political questions. So you got a bunch of law professors around the United States who love to see their name in op-eds. Donald Trump is right to talk about Lawrence Tribe, but Ted Cruz is right to say Lawrence Tribe's a Hillary Clinton supporter who's trying to cause trouble. The reality is Ted Cruz, this is not an open question. He is eligible. Anyone can sue over anything. I could sue Chris Cuomo today for bringing up bad things about the Browns every week. But I would get thrown out of court, all right? So that doesn't matter if people can sue. What matters is there or there. So I trust Judge Larson. That issue is dead. Nevertheless, Donald Trump won the debate.
I mean, Hugh, respectfully, I would probably agree with you and your judge friend on this. But the point is the political point. There would be a suit. There would be headlines. There would be time wasted. That's the problem.
No, there won't. Jeff, no, there won't.
All right, go. Michael, be the tiebreaker. Is this going to go on? Does this have legs, or was it done last night?
I don't think it's about the legality or his eligibility. And again, right now, I'm sure Donald Trump is watching this and chuckling because here we are again debating an issue that, frankly, is not the crux of what he's trying to say. What I think is going on here is that he's trying to paint Ted Cruz, much like he painted Barack Obama, as an other. He's not one of us. He was born somewhere else. And every day that we talk about this, I think he underscores that with a handful of folks in Iowa.
I want to go to you, Hugh, because I saw you sort of scoff when Michael Smerconish said that he thought that Kasich turned in a great performance. Let's talk about some of the other people on stage beyond Cruz and Trump. What did you think of John Kasich, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, Hugh?
John Kasich is my governor. He's my friend. I'm from Ohio. I have Ohio values, and they're the same as New York values and California values. They're American values. John Kasich did very well last night with what he planned to do. He is doggedly sticking to the experience card, and he brings up the same script. So it must work in the town halls in New Hampshire that I don't go to, and he must be banking on it because he does not depart from it. It doesn't play for me on television. I don't think it plays for the national audience. I don't think it plays in Iowa, but maybe it plays in New Hampshire. Dr. Carson has faded, all right? I just don't see him as being a force in this. And I think Jeb Bush almost faded, but he climbed back into the ring a couple of times, very deftly when he brought up our Muslim allies in Indonesia, our Muslim friends who are in India, the need for security, the defense buildup. But the big four, I think there's one tier at the top, and it's Trump, Cruz, Rubio, and Christie, and a top two are Trump and Rubio right now, with Ted Cruz. Got a rematch coming up next week with Donald Trump. I expect more sparks.
Michael, I know you always have your whiteboard of who's up, who's down. Who do you think moved the needle last night?
I think that Donald Trump probably held firm in Iowa. It all comes down, I think, to whether he can turn those folks out at a caucus. They're not going to sit on their sofas, check a box, and put it in the mail. Do they have the requisite passion to come out and translate into votes? That's the big X, the unknown relative to Trump. I think that Marco Rubio, you know, he's great on his feet. Going after Ted Cruz, though, perhaps in the 11th hour last evening, I don't think it's wise strategy because to the extent that he brings Cruz down a notch or two, I don't think it inures to his benefit. I think he's helping Donald Trump. And I stand firm with what I said earlier, Hugh, relative to John Kasich. I believe he's most adult-like on that stage, and he's hindered only by his reluctance to be a bomb thrower, was what you need to do, unfortunately, in this primary.
So, Jeffrey, let's finish with this about the ground game. So, do you have confidence that Donald Trump is going to be able to turn people out in Iowa to the caucuses? Because slogans are great. His performance in the debate, great. People say that he won last night. But, of course, it all comes down to whether or not people are willing to go out in the cold and actually be organizing caucus.
That's right. You know, Allison, someone sent a tweet to me a couple weeks ago of people attending a Donald Trump rally in Iowa, and the line was out this auditorium around the block. And the tagline was, by the way, it's 25 degrees here. That indicates to me a degree of passion here with Trump folks that you would think would lead them to turn out. I mean, if they're turning out and standing in the cold to go to a rally, I suspect they might do the same. But of course, we're going to find out. We're never really going to know until we get to the night up.
Absolutely.
And one last thing about Governor Christie. I was really surprised he denied that he had supported Judge Sotomayor for the Supreme Court. I happen to have written a column about this last week for the American Spectator. He said if he were President Obama, he wouldn't have appointed her, but after listening to her testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he was all for her. So, in fact, Marco Rubio was correct about that.
I was going to end it there, but Michael, I see you nodding. So did he catch Cruz in some flip-flops?
You know, there's a journalist in New Jersey named Matt Katz who I think knows more, has covered more about Chris Christie than anyone else. And in the midst of the debate, I tweeted at him last night, not relative to Justice Sotomayor, but relative to Planned Parenthood, because I wanted to be reminded of the facts. Chris Christie flat out denies having written a check to Planned Parenthood. Go back and look at the Star Ledger. They've written exhaustively on the subject. I think he'd do better if he frankly said, yes, at one point in my life, that was my perspective. I changed over time. Here's why. But to say they misquoted me, the fact checkers are going to have their work to do.
Hugh, so Chris Christie was fact checked. That's true last night. But what about when Marco Rubio went down that sort of litany of things that he said Ted Cruz had flip-flopped his positions on?
Using my boxing analogy, in the 15th round, Marco Rubio laid one on Ted Cruz. But here's the deal about fact checkers. Nick Kristof, terrific columnist for the New York Times, tweeted out that Donald Trump said, in fact, in his hearing that he wanted a 45% tariff. Fact-checking doesn't matter in these things. What matters is personality and aura and your command presence. And of all those two, the best command presence last night was Donald Trump and Marco Rubio. And I keep marveling at how Donald Trump can dominate a television screen. He reaches through the screen sometimes, and you know you're back on Celebrity Apprentice. It's an amazing skill set. And so whether or not he said 45% or not, or whether or not Chris Christie said, I like Allison Sotomayor, I would vote for her, or whether or not Ted Cruz said this or that on H-1B visas, none of that stuff matters when you go to vote. What matters is who can beat Hillary Clinton. That's the bottom line for Republican voters. And now, my friends here both are going to support, I assume, Jeffrey is. I'm not sure about Michael. We'll let Michael decide for himself. I think he might have gone over to the dark side. But we'll decide who's going to vote, who can beat Hillary Clinton.
Hugh.
Yeah.
And right now, that's open question.
Fact-checking doesn't matter.
Hugh,
we have
when somebody says the facts don't matter, if someone says the facts don't matter, I would suggest
I didn't say
they're
that.
the
I
one
said
who went to the dark
fact-checkers
side.
don't matter.
Right, you said fact-checking doesn't matter.
don't
Truer words during this election, probably never spoken. Michael, Hugh, Jeffrey, thank you so much.